So last week in part one of this conversation, I walked you through what happened in the courts with Mifepristone. And then I walked you through what the drug actually does to a woman who takes it at home. If you missed that episode, the short version is this. The Supreme Court is deciding whether Mifepristone keeps arriving by mail. The drug is a competitive antagonist of the progesterone receptor. It blocks the hormone that holds a pregnancy in place. And the second drug, Mifepristone, induces the contractions that expel the pregnancy. The FDA reports serious adverse reactions in less than 0.5% of women. The American Academy of Family Physicians puts the overall complication rate at 5.2%. The discrepancy comes from what gets counted and from a 2016 reporting change that no one talks about. So go listen to part one. It's the foundation for what we are going to do today. Today is the harder half. Today is about three things. First, the question pundits don't ask, the informed consent question, the nurse's ethics question, the one that I think any honest person, pro-choice or pro-life, should be willing to engage with. Second, what the Catholic Church sees in this whole arrangement that a pharmacy label and a court docket cannot see. Not because the church is squeamish and not because she's trying to legislate a religious view, because she has been thinking about what the human person is for 2,000 years, and she has answers that don't fit on a label. And third, at the end, a pastoral note, specifically for any woman listening who has carried this in silence. That part is non-negotiable. It's the most important part of the whole 2-episode series, and it's why I'm doing this on TradNurse and not somewhere else. You're listening to part 2 of TradNurse on the Mifepristone ruling. Let's get into it. Before we begin, nothing in this episode is medical, legal, or pastoral advice. If you are pregnant and frightened, you are not alone. There are people who will help you through this. So I want to ask the question that this entire policy framework has built itself around avoiding. This is not a moral question. This is a professional question. It's a nursing question. It's a medical ethics question. And I think anyone, pro-choice, pro-life, somewhere in between, ought to be able to engage it honestly. The question is about informed consent. Every nursing program in this country teaches the same 4 elements of informed consent. Capacity. The patient has to be able to understand and reason about the decision. Disclosure. The provider has to share the relevant information about the procedure, the risks, the alternatives. Comprehension. The patient has to actually understand what's been disclosed. And voluntariness. The patient has to be choosing this freely without coercion. Capacity, disclosure, comprehension, and voluntary. Every nurse must know that those are the 4 components of informed consent. So now ask yourself honestly, what can a 15-minute telehealth visit actually do, and what can it not do? It can confirm identity. Sometimes it can review history. It can prescribe, and it can send written materials, and that is important. That is part of any visit to your provider. What it cannot do, it cannot perform a physical exam. It cannot perform an ultrasound to confirm gestational age or rule out ectopic pregnancy. It cannot assess for the presence of a coercive partner sitting just out of the frame. It cannot read body language, and it cannot see hesitation in the eyes of a patient who is saying yes with her mouth. The last one is the one I want to sit with for a bit, because it is a part of this debate that I think gets the least honest treatment. Studies for years have consistently shown that a significant minority of women undergoing abortion report some degree of pressure or coercion from a partner, from a parent, sometimes from a sibling, sometimes from an employer, sometimes from a friend. The numbers vary by study, but you don't have to take a maximalist version of those numbers to find them sobering. Even at the low end, we are talking about real women in real numbers who would say, if asked privately, this is not what they wanted. In-person clinical visits, and I am not saying this because the clinician is going to try to talk anyone out of anything. That is just not how clinical visits work. In-person visits create at least the structural possibility of a private moment. The intake nurse takes vitals alone with the patient. The provider does the exam alone with the patient. There is at least one moment in the visit where the woman is not within earshot of whoever brought her there. A mail order model has no such moment. The drug arrives at the address listed. Whoever opens the package opens it. Whoever supervises the medication supervises it. Again, I'm not arguing that this drug should be banned. I'm just asking you to look honestly at the model of care that has been embedded within this drug and tell me whether the 4 elements of informed consent are being protected as well as we would protect them for any other medication or comparable risk. There's a second part of this, the continuity of care problem. The drug arrives. A week later, the patient has a complication at 2 a.m. Who does she call? In an in-person model, there's a chart, a prescriber, a follow-up plan. In a mail order model, the prescriber may be in a different state, may have no relationship with the patient, and may not be even reachable. The default fallback is the local emergency department, which is, by the way, exactly the cost shift Louisiana cited in its lawsuit. I want to ask you to hold one specific question in your mind, because it is a question I do not see being asked in any of the major coverage of this case. If we were talking about a different drug, any drug, with a documented overall complication rate north of 5%, a manufacturer reporting requirement that has been quietly weakened, and a known small but real risk of life-threatening complications, including sepsis and undiagnosed ectopic rupture. Would we be deploying that drug through the mail with a 15-minute telehealth visit and no in-person follow-up? If your answer is no, the next question is why we are deploying this one that way. Which brings me finally to the part of this that I think only the church really has the language for. I want to say something carefully because I know how this is going to land. Pharmacy label tells you what a drug does to a body. It does not tell you what a body is. The legal system asks who has standing to sue. It does not, it cannot ask who counts as a someone. Those are not pharmacy questions, and they are not legal questions. They are anthropological questions, questions about the human person, questions about what we are. And the Catholic Church has been thinking about these questions for 2,000 years with seriousness and with consequences. Let me tell you plainly what the Catholic Church teaches and what she does not teach, because both halves matter. The Church teaches that human life begins at conception and is to be respected and protected absolutely from that moment. That is in the Catechism, paragraph 2270. It is not a recent teaching, and it is not a political teaching. It is what the Church has held with remarkable consistency, given how few things any institution has held consistently for 2 millennia, since the very earliest centuries. The Church teaches that direct abortion, willed either as an end or as a means, is gravely contrary to the moral law. That's Catechism, paragraph 2271. The Catechism notes, and I'm paraphrasing carefully, this teaching has not changed and will not change. That is the doctrine, plain, unflinching. There is no progressive softening coming. There is no third way. The Church teaches what she teaches, and she will go on teaching it. Here is the second half. And traditional Catholics, this is the half I want my own audience to be careful about. because I see a lot of us getting this wrong. The church does not teach that every woman who has had an abortion is damned. The church does not teach that she is unloved. The church does not teach that she is beyond reach. If you read St. John Paul II's encyclical Evangelium Vitae, the Gospel of Life, paragraph 99, and I would invite you to read it, you will find some of the most tender pastoral language about post-abortive women that has been written in any official church document. He addresses these women directly. He acknowledges the wound. He invites them by name into the mercy of Christ, into the sacrament of confession, and into healing. If you take only the doctrine without the pastoral note, you are not preaching the Catholic faith. You are preaching a caricature of it. And if you are a Catholic listening to this show, please do not do that. Real women are listening, and some of them are carrying this in silence. They need to hear the doctrine and the mercy, both always. Now, let me say a word about the anthropology, because I think this is where the conversation could actually move. The Catholic claim about the unborn human is not a sectarian religious claim. It does not require you to accept any particular religious promise. The argument runs like this. The human embryo is biologically a distinct member of the species Homo sapiens, with its own complete genome from the moment of fertilization on a continuous developmental trajectory that has no sharp discontinuity at any point between conception and birth. Heartbeat, brain waves, viability, and birth itself. None of these is a metaphysical hinge that converts a non-person into a person. Either it is one of us from the beginning, or one of us is a category we are assigning for our own convenience. The Catholic Church has chosen the first answer. The pharmacy framework, by treating the embryo as something to be cleared, has implicitly chosen the second. And here's the part nobody is willing to say out loud. The second answer has never been defended openly. It is only ever assumed. So that is not me imposing a religious view. This is me asking the policymakers to defend their anthropology in the same way they expect the church to defend hers. So now, to close this segment, I want to speak finally to two listeners. If you are a Catholic woman who has used this drug or any other method, and you are carrying it in silence, I want you to hear this clearly. The door of the church is open. Sacramental confession is real. You are not outside the love of Christ. You never were. You are not the only woman who has ever sat in a pew on a Sunday morning carrying this, and you are not alone. And you are loved. And if you are a Catholic listening, man or woman, angry, watching this story unfold this week, anger is appropriate. Anger is also insufficient. This work is at the parish, at the Pregnancy Resource Center, in the diaper drives and the maternity homes and the friendships with women you actually know who are facing decisions in real time. Outrage on a podcast, this podcast included, is not a substitute for sitting next to someone at 2 a.m. going through something very traumatic. 2 episodes ago, when I started this, I said the deeper question, what's actually in the envelope and who is the someone the envelope ends, was not going to be settled by 9 justices in a Supreme Court building. It is going to be settled in millions of small acts that none of us will ever see by the rest of us. By the Catholic mom who quietly invites a frightened coworker home for dinner, by the parish that funds her pregnancy resource center, the priest who helps a woman through this, by the nurse who on a busy shift slows down for 60 seconds and looks her patient in the eye and has a conversation with them. This show exists because the bedside and the catechism have been speaking the same language for a long time, and somebody has to help translate it. This has been part 2 of TradNurse on the Mifepristone ruling. Thanks for listening. Share both episodes if they were useful, and I'll see you next week. We will have known how the court ruled and what comes next.